Before I tell you this story, I want you to know something. I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother. A 56-year-old widow who spent 30 years as a nurse in a rural hospital, who grows tomatoes in her backyard, who bakes apple pies for the church fundraiser. An ordinary woman living an ordinary life. But when someone tries to kill your daughter, your pregnant daughter, something ancient wakes up inside you. Something that doesn't care about politeness or propriety or playing by the rules. Something that remembers your grandmother's steel spine, your grandfather's steady hands, and the lesson they taught you. Family protects family. Always. This is the story of how I learned that the blood they called dirty was the strongest thing I had. My name is Daphne Harrington, and this is what happened when my daughter whispered those words I'll never forget. Mom, she said, I have dirty blood. October in rural Pennsylvania comes cold and damp, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. That Friday evening, I was driving home from the farmer's market, my old Chevy loaded with the last good apples of the season. I had plans, simple, comforting plans. Make jam, watch my shows, call Isabel to see how she was feeling in her first trimester. Normal, safe. The kind of evening a woman my age has earned after 3 decades of night shifts, bedpans, and holding the hands of dying patients. My phone shattered that peace at 6:47 p.m. The number was local but unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer. Telemarketers had gotten aggressive lately, but something made me pick up. Hello? Ms. Harrington? A man's voice, breathless and urgent. Daphne Harrington? My heart kicked. Nobody calls you by your full name with that tone unless something's wrong. Yes, this is Daphne. Who is this? My name's Sam Williams. I'm a hunter. Live over by Miller's Creek. Ma'am, I found your daughter. The world tilted. What? Found her where? What happened? In the woods behind the old quarry. She's hurt bad, Ms. Harrington. Real bad. She's conscious but barely speaking. Had her ID in her pocket. Your number's listed as emergency contact. I already called 911, but they said it'll take at least 20 minutes to get out here. I don't remember making the decision to turn the car around. My body just did it, tires screeching on the wet clay road as I spun a U-turn that would have gotten me a ticket if any cop had seen it. I'm coming. Stay with her. Don't let her... My voice cracked. Don't let her be alone. I won't, ma'am. I got my jacket under her head and a thermos of coffee if she can drink. But ma'am, you should know. She's been beaten. This wasn't no accident. Beaten. My daughter. My Isabel. The little girl who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared her. The woman who'd called me 3 weeks ago, crying happy tears because she'd finally gotten pregnant after 2 years of trying. I'm 10 minutes away, I sassy said, though it was more like 15. Tell her Mama's coming. The logging road to the old quarry was a nightmare of potholes and mud. My Chevy groaned and rattled, but I pushed it harder than I should have, not caring if I destroyed the shocks. All I could think was, Isabel, my baby. Hold on. When I spotted Sam Williams' pickup truck, I barely managed to brake before I was out the door and running. He'd left the headlights on, pointing toward the tree line, and in that harsh white light, I could see him standing there, a big man in camouflage, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Where? I gasped. 100 yards in. I marked the path. Look for the orange tape I tied to branches. He held out a flashlight. You want me to come with you? No. Stay here. Flag down the ambulance. I was already moving, crashing through the underbrush like a woman possessed. Branches whipped my face. My shoes slipped in mud. I stumbled over a root and went down hard on one knee, but I scrambled back up and kept going. Then I saw her. At first, I didn't recognize my own daughter. She was curled on her side on Sam's hunting jacket, her expensive cream coat, the one Ethan had bought her for their anniversary, torn and filthy. Her blonde hair was matted with blood and leaves. Her face. Oh, God. Her face. Isabel. I dropped to my knees beside her, terrified to touch her, terrified not to. Baby, I'm here. Mama's here. Her eyes, one swollen nearly shut, the other clouded with pain, tried to focus on me. Her split lip trembled in what might have been a smile. Mom, she whispered. Just that one word, but it destroyed me. Don't talk, honey. Save your strength. The ambulance is coming. My hands hovered over her, trying to assess the damage without causing more pain. Her right arm lay at an unnatural angle, broken, no question. Bruises were already blooming purple and black across her visible skin. And blood, there was so much blood. But she grabbed my hand with her good one, surprisingly strong. "Mom, not accident." "I know, baby. Sam told me. Don't worry about that now. Victoria." She forced the word out through damaged lips. "Victoria did this." I froze. "Your mother-in-law? Isabel, are you sure? Maybe you're confused." "No." Despite the pain, her voice was suddenly clear, sharp with a terrible certainty. "Victoria Sterling drove me here, said she wanted to show me land. Then she—" A shudder ran through her. "Hit me. Tire iron, I think. Kept hitting me. Kept saying—" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Said I have dirty blood. Disgrace to their family." The words hit me like a physical blow. Dirty blood. The same words I'd heard growing up, whispered behind hands at school, spat by the mother of a boy who'd asked me to prom before his family set him straight. The words my grandmother had taught me to turn into armor. But hearing them attached to my daughter, hearing they'd been said while someone beat her, something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. "Where's your phone?" I asked quietly. "Pocket. Left side. Mom, I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. Is the baby—" "Shh, we'll check everything at the hospital." I carefully reached into her coat pocket and found her iPhone, screen cracked but still working. "What's your passcode?" 0825. Mom, I unlocked it and opened her recent calls. Ethan's name was at the top, with 3 missed calls from him in the last hour. I ignored those and kept scrolling, looking for— "Mom, what are you doing?" "Making sure we have evidence. Did Victoria know you were recording when she—" "I wasn't recording." Isabel's undamaged eye widened. "Was I? I didn't think—" But I'd found it. Voice Memos app, last recording, 18 minutes, 47 seconds. Recorded today at 5:23 p.m., right around when Victoria would have brought her here. "Isabel," I said carefully, "did you have this app open in your pocket maybe? Sometimes phones activate if she thought, wincing. "When we got in her car, my phone buzzed. A text. I checked it, opened the app by accident maybe, then put it back in my pocket without closing. And it recorded." I stared at the file. 18 minutes of everything. "Play it," she whispered. "I need to know if it's real." I pressed play, volume low. Victoria Sterling's cultured voice filled the small space between us. "Lovely out here, isn't it? So private. No one comes here anymore since the quarry shut down." "Victoria, what did you want to tell me about the foundation paperwork?" That was Isabel, uncertain, already scared. "Oh, Isabel." A pause. "You should never have gone through Ethan's safe. You should never have asked me questions. I don't understand. If you can just explain—" The sound that came next made my stomach turn. A meaty thwack, Isabel's scream, then Victoria's voice again, colder than I'd ever heard it. "Dirty blood. That's what you are. What you've always been. Did you really think we'd let you contaminate our family line?" I stopped the recording. I'd heard enough. Isabel was crying silently, tears running down her battered face. "Mom," she choked out. "She found out I discovered the embezzlement. $5 million a year from the charity foundation. Shell companies. She's been stealing—" "We'll deal with that." I gently wiped her tears, careful of the bruises. "Right now, we get you safe." In the distance, a siren wailed. The ambulance, finally. But even as relief flooded through me, my mind was already working, already planning. Because I knew Victoria Sterling. I knew people like her. They had money, connections, lawyers who could make problems disappear. And I knew one more thing, as certain as my own heartbeat. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next hour was a blur of flashing lights, urgent voices, and the controlled chaos of emergency medicine. I rode in the ambulance, holding Isabel's good hand while the paramedics worked. They were professional, efficient, but I saw the concern in their eyes when they took her blood pressure, when they palpated her abdomen, when they immobilized her broken arm. "Ma'am, we're taking her to County General," the older paramedic said. "It's the closest—" "No," the word came out harder than I intended. "Take her to St. Catherine's in Harrisville. It's farther, but, ma'am, with injuries like this, time matters. County General is funded by the Sterling family." I looked him dead in the eye. "They have people everywhere. My daughter was attacked by Victoria Sterling. If we go to county, I don't know if she'll be safe." The two paramedics exchanged a glance. The younger one keyed his radio. Dispatch Medic 4. Change of destination to St. Catharines, Harrisville. Patient's family has concerns about county. Copy that, Medic 4. St. Catharines is expecting you. Isabel squeezed my hand weakly. Thank you, she mouthed. St. Catharines' emergency room was smaller than county, but I'd done clinical rotations here decades ago and knew it was good. More importantly, I knew one of the attending physicians. Dr. Sarah Mitchell met us at the ambulance bay, her dark face creased with concern when she saw who was on the gurney. Daphne? Is that— Oh my God, Isabel? Sarah, thank God you're on tonight. I climbed out as they unloaded the stretcher. She needs you, and she needs discretion. Sarah took one look at Isabel's face and understood. We'd been friends since nursing school, two women who'd faced down prejudice together. She knew what discretion meant when it came to powerful families. Trauma Bay 2, she ordered the nurses. Full workup, CT head, chest, abdomen, orthopedics for the arm, get OB down here stat. And somebody find me Detective Cooper from the state police, not local. Things moved fast after that. While doctors examined Isabel, I stood outside the trauma bay, watching through the window as they cut away her clothes, started IVs, ordered tests. Every instinct screamed at me to be in there, but I knew Sarah would take care of her. What I needed to do was think. Victoria Sterling had tried to kill my daughter. Would have killed her if Sam Williams hadn't been hunting in those woods. The recording proved it. Victoria's voice, clear as day, admitting to the assault, revealing her motive. But Victoria had resources, money, lawyers, and her son, Isabel's husband, who'd always been blind to his mother's faults. The ER doors whooshed open, and a man in plainclothes strode in, badge clipped to his belt. Mid-40s, graying at the temples with the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen too much. I'm looking for Daphne Harrington, he said to the triage nurse. That's me. I approached him. Detective James Cooper, Pennsylvania State Police. He shook my hand firmly. Dr. Mitchell called me. She said we have a serious assault case, possible attempted murder, and that the victim might be in danger. Come with me. I led him to a quiet corner of the waiting room and told him everything. The call from Sam, finding Isabel, her accusations about Victoria Sterling. When I mentioned the Sterling name, his expression didn't change, but I saw recognition flicker in his eyes. That's a serious allegation, he said carefully. The Sterlings are well known in this state. They have connections, I know. I pulled out Isabel's phone. Which is why we need to move fast. Detective, my daughter accidentally recorded the entire attack. 18 minutes of Victoria Sterling beating her and admitting to embezzling from her charity foundation. His eyes widened. You have the recording? Right here, but I haven't backed it up yet, and if Victoria realizes it exists, let me see it. We sat in that fluorescent-lit corner, and I played him the recording. All 18 minutes. His face grew harder with each passing moment, especially when Victoria's voice turned vicious, when the sounds of violence became unmistakable, when she said those words, "Dirty blood, contaminate our family line." When it finished, he sat back, jaw tight. Ms. Harrington, I need to take possession of this phone as evidence. But first, you're right. We need to secure multiple backups. Do you have cloud storage? I can set it up. Do it now. Upload it to 3 different services if you can. And send me a copy. He handed me his card. Once that's done, I'm officially seizing this phone. And then I need to talk to your daughter. 20 minutes later, the recording was safely backed up in multiple locations. Detective Cooper was about to bag the phone when Sarah emerged from the trauma bay, pulling off her gloves. Daphne? She touched my arm gently. Isabel's stable. Right arm. Clean fracture of the radius. Orthopedics can set it. 3 cracked ribs, mild concussion, extensive soft tissue damage. We're doing a CT to rule out internal bleeding. And the baby? Sarah's face softened into a smile. Strong heartbeat. Placenta looks good. Your grandbaby's a fighter. I nearly collapsed with relief. Detective Cooper steadied me. Thank you, I whispered. Can I see her? In a few minutes, but Daphne, Sarah's smile faded. The pattern of injuries. This wasn't random. Whoever did this wanted to cause maximum pain and trauma. If she hadn't been found when she was— She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. They let me in to see Isabel 20 minutes later. She was in a private room. Sarah had pulled strings to get her isolated from the main ward, with monitors beeping softly and an IV dripping clear fluid into her arm. Her face looked even worse under the harsh hospital lights, one eye swollen completely shut now, her lip stitched where it had split. But she was alive, and when she saw me, she tried to smile. "Hey, Mama," she whispered. I pulled a chair close to the bed and took her good hand. "Hey, baby girl, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," she winced. "But the baby's okay?" "Strong as an ox, according to Dr. Sarah. Takes after his grandmother." "Or her grandmother." A tear slid down her bruised cheek. "Mom, I'm so scared. Victoria, she meant to kill me. She said it. Said I'd ruin everything if I talked. She's not going to touch you again. I said it like a vow. Detective Cooper has the recording. He's building a case. You're safe here." "Am I?" Her good eye searched my face. "You know the Sterlings, Mom. They have people everywhere. Money, lawyers, politicians in their pocket. County General gets $500,000 a year from their foundation. The police chief plays golf with William Sterling every Sunday. How do we fight that?" It was a fair question, and it was the same question that had been eating at me since I'd heard Victoria's voice on that recording. So casual about violence, so confident she'd get away with it. But sitting there, looking at my daughter's battered face, I felt something I hadn't felt in 25 years. The same focused clarity I'd had in law school, before my mother got sick, and I dropped out to take care of her, before I'd become a nurse instead of a lawyer. "We fight smart," I said. "We build a case they can't dismiss or bury, and we use every advantage we have." "What advantages? We don't have money, we don't have connections." "No," I squeezed her hand. "But we have the truth, and I have something I haven't told you about." Isabel looked confused. "What?" "Before I became a nurse, I was in law school. 3 years, baby. I was in the top 10% of my class. I only dropped out because your Grandma Grace got cancer and needed full-time care." I smiled grimly. "I never finished my degree, but I know how the law works. I know how to build a case, and I sure as hell know how to fight when someone threatens my family." For the first time since I'd found her in those woods, something like hope flickered in Isabel's eye. "You never told me that." "It was a long time ago. Another life." I stood up. "But that life's coming back now, because we need it. Now I need you to tell me everything about those financial documents you found. Every detail." Over the next hour, while nurses came and went to check vitals and adjust medications, Isabel told me everything. How she'd been helping Ethan prepare the annual report for the Hope Foundation, his mother's pride and joy, the charity that had earned Victoria Sterling awards and glowing profiles in society magazines. How Isabel, with her accountant's eye for detail, had noticed something odd in the expense reports. $5 million a year going to consulting firms, Isabel said, her voice getting stronger as she focused on the numbers. Companies with names like Strategic Solutions LLC and Brennan Advisory Group. But when I tried to find their websites, their office addresses, anything, nothing. They didn't exist except on paper. "Shell companies," I murmured. "Classic money laundering." That's what I thought. So I dug deeper, found the bank account numbers on the payment authorizations, traced them to the Cayman Islands. She paused. "That's when I knew it was serious. That's when I made copies of everything." "Where are the copies?" "Cloud storage. I used a service Victoria doesn't know about under my maiden name. The password is..." She told me, and I memorized it immediately. "Good girl. And that's when you confronted Victoria?" "Not confronted exactly. I asked her to explain. Gave her the benefit of the doubt." Isabel's voice turned bitter. "I actually thought there might be some legitimate explanation, that maybe I was misunderstanding something. And she suggested you drive out to look at property. Said she wanted to talk where Ethan wouldn't hear, where we wouldn't be interrupted. Said she'd explain everything." A shudder ran through her. "I was so stupid, Mom." "You trusted your husband's mother. That's not stupid, that's decent. She's the monster here." There was a knock at the door. Detective Cooper stepped in, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Ms. Harrington, Isabel," Cooper said. "This is ADA Patricia Reeves from the State Attorney's Office. I've briefed her on the situation. She'd like to hear the recording and get Isabel's statement." The next morning, Saturday, I woke up stiff and sore from sleeping in a chair beside Isabel's bed. Someone had draped a blanket over me during the night, probably Sarah, and left coffee in a thermos on the side table. Isabel was still sleeping, her breathing deep and even. The swelling on her face had gone down slightly, but the bruises were darker now, that ugly purple-black that comes before healing begins. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Cooper. "Call me when you're awake. Development." I stepped into the hallway and called him back. "What's happened?" "Victoria Sterling showed up at the hospital," he said. "About an hour ago. Security stopped her at the information desk when she tried to get Isabel's room number. She left when they told her she wasn't on the approved visitor list, but Daphne, she knows Isabel's here." My blood ran cold. "Is she gone?" "For now. Hospital security has her photo. They'll call us if she comes back." He paused. "But there's something else. Something good." I ran financials on the Hope Foundation overnight. "Ms. Harrington, your daughter was right. We've got 5 years of suspicious transactions, totaling over $25 million. $25 million. The number staggered me. "But here's what's interesting," Cooper continued. "The shell companies weren't created by Victoria. They were set up by Thomas Brennan." "Who's that?" "The Foundation's CFO. He's been with Hope for 7 years. Clean record, good reputation, married with a daughter in college. On paper, he's completely legitimate. But he's also the one who signed off on all these consulting payments. And get this, when I pulled his personal financials, he bought a condo in Grand Cayman 2 years ago. Paid cash, $300,000. I let that sink in. He's in on it. Looking that way. I've got a forensic accountant coming in Monday to dig deeper. But Daphne, if we can prove Brennan and Victoria were working together, we can turn him," I finished. "Offer him a deal to testify against her." "Exactly. You really did study law, didn't you?" "Top 10% of my class," I said. "Detective, I want to help. I may not have a law degree, but I know how to research, how to build a case. Let me work with you on this." There was a pause. Then, "Unofficially? Sure. You find something, you call me, and we do it by the book. But you've got good instincts, Ms. Harrington. We could use that." After we hung up, I stood in the hospital corridor, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades. Purpose. The same fire that had driven me through law school, that had made me believe I could change things, fight for people who needed fighting for. I'd buried that fire when I became a nurse. Nursing was good, honest work, helping people, saving lives. But it wasn't the same as fighting for justice. Now that fire was back, and it was burning hot. I was heading back to Isabel's room when I saw her. Victoria Sterling stood at the end of the corridor, perfectly dressed in a cream pantsuit, her silver hair immaculate, a bouquet of roses in her hands. She looked like someone's elegant grandmother, someone who donated to charities and hosted garden parties. She looked nothing like a woman who'd beaten her pregnant daughter-in-law and left her to die. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she started walking toward me, that practiced smile on her face. "Daphne," she said warmly, as if we were old friends. "I heard about poor Isabel's accident. How terrible. I came as soon as I could." Every instinct screamed at me to grab her by the throat, but I held still, kept my face neutral. "Accident? Her car going off the road like that." Victoria shook her head. "Thank God someone found her. Is she all right? Can I see her?" "She's not having visitors." "But I'm her mother-in-law. Surely you're not on the approved list." I kept my voice level, professional. "Only immediate family. Doctor's orders." Something flickered behind Victoria's eyes. Anger, maybe, or calculation. "I see. Well, perhaps you could give her these." She held out the roses. "Tell her we're all thinking of her." "I'll make sure she gets them." I didn't move to take the flowers. We stood there, 2 women in a hospital hallway, having a conversation that was really about something else entirely. "You know," Victoria said softly, "accidents happen all the time, especially to people in vulnerable positions, people who might say things they shouldn't say, things that could ruin lives. Is that a threat?" "A concern," she smiled. "I've always liked you, Daphne. You're a strong woman. I respect that. But sometimes strong women make poor choices when they're trying to protect their children. Choices that backfire." I stepped closer to her, close enough that I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the hardness beneath the cultured exterior. Let me be very clear, Victoria. If you come near my daughter again, if you so much as send her a text message, I will make sure every newspaper in this state knows what you did. I will stand on the courthouse steps and play that recording for anyone who'll listen." Her smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold as ice. "Recording? I don't know what you mean." 18 minutes. Your voice. Crystal clear. Admitting to assault, theft, and attempted murder. Plus some truly vile things about my family's heritage. I smiled back at her. "The police have it. So does the state attorney. And I have backups in places you'll never find." For just a moment, Victoria's mask slipped. I saw fear flash across her face, quickly suppressed. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Your exact words were dirty blood. That's what you are." "Want me to keep going?" She went pale. The roses trembled in her hand. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued quietly. "You're going to leave this hospital. You're going to go home. And you're going to wait for Detective Cooper to show up with a warrant. Because he will. And when he does, you're going to find out that money and connections can't buy you out of everything." Victoria's composure cracked. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. The Sterling family built this state. We have senators, judges, police chiefs, and I have the truth." I cut her off. "Which one do you think wins in the end?" For a long moment she stared at me. Then she dropped the roses on the floor and turned on her heel, walking away without another word. But just before she reached the elevator, she looked back. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's not." That afternoon, while Isabel slept and I sat researching shell company structures on my phone, a man I'd never met arrived with information that changed everything. Detective Cooper had brought him, David Park, a forensic accountant from Philadelphia. Wiry, intense, mid-40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the excited energy of someone who loved hunting through financial records the way some people loved crossword puzzles. "Ms. Harrington," he said, shaking my hand enthusiastically. "Detective Cooper told me about your daughter. I'm so sorry. But I think we can nail these bastards. Pardon my language." "No pardon needed. What did you find?" David pulled out his laptop and opened it on the small table in Isabel's room. She was awake now, propped up on pillows, watching with tired but alert eyes. "Okay, so I started with the shell companies your daughter identified. 7 of them, all registered in Delaware, which is basically the shell company capital of America. Each one has a different name, but they all share some interesting characteristics." He pulled up a spreadsheet covered in numbers and highlighted cells. First, they were all registered within a 3-month period 7 years ago, right after the Hope Foundation got a major grant from the state. Second, they all use the same registered agent, a company called Secure Start that specializes in privacy services, which is code for hiding ownership. And third, this is where it gets interesting, they all have the same bank account pattern. "What do you mean?" I leaned closer. "Money flows in from the Hope Foundation, sits in the account for exactly 72 hours, then transfers out to offshore accounts. Every single time, like clockwork." He adjusted his glasses. "That's not normal business behavior. That's laundering. They're using the 72-hour window because it's the sweet spot, long enough to look legitimate, short enough to avoid most automated fraud detection." "Can you trace where the offshore money goes?" Isabel asked. "That's harder. The Cayman accounts have privacy protections, but..." David grinned. "I got creative. I cross-referenced the timing of the offshore transfers with real estate transactions, luxury purchases, anything that might show where the money ended up." He pulled up another screen. "Thomas Brennan, the CFO, made several large purchases in the last 3 years. The Grand Cayman condo Detective Cooper mentioned, $300,000. A boat registered in the Bahamas, $250,000. And he's been paying for a membership at an exclusive club in Nassau, $30,000 a year." "All cash purchases?" Cooper asked. "All cash. No mortgage, no financing. For a guy whose official salary is $120,000 a year, that's impossible unless he's skimming millions," I finished. "Exactly. But here's what's really interesting." David's eyes lit up. "I found email communications between Victoria Sterling and Thomas Brennan. They use encrypted email, but they got sloppy, forwarded some messages to their regular accounts by mistake. And those regular accounts?" He tapped the screen. "Subpoenaed this morning, thanks to Detective Cooper's very efficient judge friend." He pulled up a series of emails dated over the past 6 months. From T.B. Rennan at hopefoundation.org to V. Sterling at hopefoundation.org. Subject, the accountant issue. Victoria, we have a problem. E's wife has been asking questions about the consulting firms. She's smart. She noticed the pattern. We need to discuss damage control. From VSTERLING at HOPEFOUNDATION.org to TBRENNAN at HOPEFOUNDATION.org. The accountant issue. Don't panic. I'll handle it. She trusts me. A few well-placed lies and she'll think she misunderstood. If that doesn't work, there are other options. The emails got darker from there. References to permanent solutions and removing obstacles. And then, dated 2 days before Victoria attacked Isabel, from TBRENNAN at HOPEFOUNDATION.org to VSTERLING at HOPEFOUNDATION.org. Subject RE. We need to meet. She knows too much. She has copies of the financial records. V. We can't let her go to the police. I know what you're thinking and I don't like it, but we're out of options. Do what you have to do. The room went silent. Isabel had gone pale. He knew, she whispered. Thomas knew Victoria was going to... Conspiracy to commit murder, Cooper said grimly. That's what this is. Premeditated. They planned it together. I felt that cold rage settling in my chest again. Not just Victoria, then. 2 people had decided my daughter's life was worth less than their stolen millions. Can we use this? I asked David. In court? Absolutely. These emails are admissible. Combined with the financial evidence and Isabel's recording, we've got a rock-solid case. He looked at Cooper. You bring these 2 in, they're both going away for a long time. Cooper nodded slowly. But we need to be strategic. If we arrest them both at once, they'll lawyer up, won't say a word to each other or us. But if we can turn one against the other... Thomas, I said immediately. He's the weaker link. He's got a family, a reputation. Victoria's a sociopath. She won't break. But Thomas? Show him these emails. Show him we have everything. Offer him a deal. He'll flip on Victoria to save himself, Cooper finished. Ms. Harrington, you sure you didn't finish law school? Life got in the way, I said. But I'm finishing this. They arrested Thomas Brennan on Sunday morning at his home in front of his wife and daughter. Cooper called me with the news. Thomas had immediately asked for a lawyer, but the wife had broken down, demanding to know what her husband had done. She didn't know, Cooper said. I'd stake my badge on it. Patricia Brennan thought her husband was a good man. Finding out he helped plan a murder? She's devastated. Good, I said coldly. Maybe she'll convince him to do the right thing. We're giving him 48 hours to think about it. His lawyer's smart. She'll tell him a cooperation deal is his only chance at seeing his daughter graduate college instead of visiting through prison glass. 48 hours. 2 days for Thomas to decide whether to save himself by destroying Victoria. 2 days that felt like forever. Isabel was being discharged on Monday morning. Her arm was in a cast, her ribs were still healing, but Dr. Sarah had cleared her to go home. To my home, not the Sterling mansion. We'd packed her things, arranged for outpatient follow-up, and I'd spent the night in the chair beside her bed one last time. It was Sunday night, around 11 when it happened. I dozed off, exhausted from 3 days of adrenaline and fear. Isabel was sleeping deeply, finally, the pain medication giving her the rest she desperately needed. The sound of the door opening woke me. I thought it was a nurse at first. They came in every few hours to check vitals, so quiet I barely noticed. But something felt wrong. The footsteps were different. Slower. Heavier. I opened my eyes. Victoria Sterling stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. She was dressed in scrubs, blue hospital scrubs with a name tag I couldn't read from this distance. Her silver hair was tucked under a surgical cap, and she was holding a pillow. Time seemed to stop. I saw it all with perfect clarity. Victoria moving toward Isabel's bed, the pillow in her hands, the absolute determination on her face. She was going to smother my daughter, right here, in a hospital, disguised as a nurse, and she thought she'd get away with it, because she always got away with everything. I was out of the chair and moving before conscious thought kicked in. "Get away from her!" My voice came out as a roar. Victoria spun toward me, and for a split second, our eyes met. Hers were wild, desperate, nothing like the cultured socialite I'd known. This was a cornered animal. She lunged at Isabel anyway. I hit her full force, driving my shoulder into her midsection like I was making a tackle. We crashed into the bedside table, sending the water pitcher flying. Victoria was lighter than me, but younger, stronger, and desperation gave her an edge. She swung the pillow at my head, ridiculous and terrifying at once, and caught me across the face. "You ruined everything," she screamed. "Your dirty blood, your dirty daughter. You don't belong in our world." I grabbed her wrists, trying to control the pillow, trying to keep her away from Isabel. Behind me, I heard my daughter scream, heard the alarm button beeping as she pressed it frantically. "Our world?" I gasped, struggling to hold Victoria back. "You mean the world where you steal from sick children? Where you beat pregnant women? That world?" Victoria's face twisted with rage. She was crying now, tears and spit flying as she fought. "I built that foundation. Every dollar, every donation. I earned it." And she was going to destroy it. Destroy my reputation. Destroy my family's legacy for what? For nothing. For the truth. I shoved her backward, and she stumbled over the fallen chair. That's when security burst through the door. 2 large men in uniform, followed immediately by Detective Cooper, who'd been watching the hospital all night, who'd expected exactly this. Victoria fought them too, screaming obscenities, all her cultured veneer gone. They had to physically restrain her, handcuff her, while she spat and snarled like something feral. "Victoria Sterling," Cooper said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, breaking and entering, and about 6 other charges I'll think of on the way to the station." "This is a mistake," Victoria shrieked. "I'm a Sterling. You can't—" "I just did." As they dragged her out, still screaming, Victoria looked back at me one last time, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. Pure, undiluted fear. She finally understood. She'd lost. I turned to Isabel, who was sobbing, shaking, clutching her cast to her chest. I climbed onto the bed carefully and wrapped my arms around her, holding my baby girl the way I had when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "It's over," I whispered. "She's gone. You're safe." "She tried to kill me again," Isabel choked out. "In the hospital. But she didn't. She failed. And this time there were witnesses. This time there's no amount of money or connections that can save her." Detective Cooper approached the bed, his face grim but satisfied. "It's all on camera," he said. "The hallway, this room, we've got everything. Her breaking in, the disguise, the pillow, combined with everything else?" He shook his head. "She's going away for a very long time." I held my daughter tighter and let myself believe, finally, that it was true. We'd won. Thomas Brennan's lawyer called Detective Cooper 40 hours after her client's arrest. I was at home with Isabel. My home, the small house I'd raised her in, with its creaky floors and garden full of the last autumn vegetables. She was resting in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals she'd never thrown away, and posters of bands she'd loved at 16. Safe. Finally safe. Cooper called me directly. "He's ready to talk. Ms. Harrington, you want to be there? Can I be? Officially? No. Unofficially? I've got an observation room with one-way glass. A D.A. Reeves approved it. She says your instincts have been solid throughout this case. She wants your read on him." An hour later, I stood in a small, dark room at the State Police Barracks, watching through glass as Thomas Brennan sat across from Detective Cooper and ADA Patricia Reeves. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, and his hands shook as he clutched a styrofoam cup of coffee. His lawyer, Margaret Chen, a sharp woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, sat beside him, her face professionally neutral. "My client," she began, "is prepared to provide full cooperation in exchange for consideration in sentencing." Reeves didn't blink. "That depends on what he gives us." "Everything." Thomas's voice cracked. "I'll give you everything. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, every transaction. Email communications between Victoria and myself. Phone records. Meeting notes, all of it. And your involvement in the assault on Isabel Sterling? Thomas's face crumpled. I knew. God help me. I knew what Victoria was planning. She told me 3 days before. Said Isabel had become a problem that needed to be resolved. I knew what that meant, and He covered his face with his hands. I told her to do what she had to do. I didn't stop her. I'm a coward and a criminal, and I'll live with that for the rest of my life. But you didn't participate in the actual assault? No. I was in Philadelphia that day at a conference. I have hotel records, witnesses. Victoria acted alone. He looked up, eyes red. But I'm guilty too. Conspiracy, accessory, whatever the legal term is. I knew, and I let it happen. In the observation room, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Thomas Brennan was weak and greedy, but at least he owned it. At least he was capable of shame. Reeves leaned forward. Tell me about Victoria Sterling. How did this start? Thomas took a shaky breath. 7 years ago. I'd just been hired as CFO of the Hope Foundation. Victoria was brilliant at fundraising, at courting donors. The money rolled in, but it was never enough for her. She wanted more prestige, more influence, more personal wealth. So she approached you? Yes. Told me we could skim a little off the top, that no one would notice, that we deserved it for our hard work. He laughed bitterly. A little turned into $5 million a year. We set up the shell companies together, created fake consulting contracts. I handled the technical details. She provided the cover story if anyone asked questions. And when Isabel started asking questions? Thomas's hands tightened on the coffee cup. Victoria panicked. I'd never seen her like that. She said Isabel was contaminating their family, that she'd always been suspicious of her motives. Started talking about Isabel's heritage, her mother's background, horrible racist things I should have called out but didn't. Because you were in too deep, Cooper said. Because I'm a coward. Thomas met his eyes. Detective, I've destroyed my marriage. My daughter won't speak to me. My reputation is gone. The only thing I have left is the truth. So I'm giving it to you. All of it. Victoria Sterling masterminded this. She beat Isabel and left her to die. And when that didn't work, she tried again at the hospital. She's dangerous, and she needs to be stopped. Reeves and Cooper exchanged glances. In the observation room, I nodded. He was telling the truth. I could feel it. And more importantly, his testimony would seal Victoria's fate. Mr. Brennan, Reeves said, we're prepared to offer you a plea deal. You plead guilty to embezzlement and conspiracy. You testify fully and truthfully against Victoria Sterling, and will recommend 7 to 10 years instead of 25 to life. Thomas closed his eyes. I'll take it. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks later in the county courthouse, a grand old building with marble columns and the weight of history in every stone. Victoria had hired Harrison Webb, one of the most expensive defense attorneys in the state, a silver-haired man famous for getting wealthy clients acquitted. But all his skill couldn't change the facts. The courtroom was packed. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, with Isabel beside me. She was 5 months pregnant now, her belly showing despite the loose dress she wore. Dr. Sarah had cleared her to attend but warned her to stay calm, to avoid stress, as if that were possible. Victoria sat at the defense table in a designer suit, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked nothing like the wild-eyed woman who'd attacked my daughter in the hospital. She'd rebuilt her mask, but I could see the cracks if I looked close enough. The tension in her jaw, the white knuckles as she clutched a pen. Judge Martha Reynolds, a black woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for nonsense, called the court to order. The state of Pennsylvania versus Victoria Sterling, she announced. Charges include attempted murder, aggravated assault, embezzlement, conspiracy, and breaking and entering with intent to commit murder. How does the defendant plead? Victoria stood, spine straight. Not guilty, Your Honor. Of course she did. The prosecution presented its case methodically. First came Sam Williams, the hunter who'd found Isabel in the woods. He described the scene, the blood, the injuries, Isabel's whispered words about who'd hurt her. Then Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who detailed the medical evidence. Blunt force trauma consistent with being struck multiple times by a heavy object. 3 cracked ribs, fractured radius, severe contusions, and a concussion. The pattern of injuries suggests sustained, intentional violence. Harrison Webb tried to shake her on cross-examination. Doctor, isn't it possible these injuries came from a fall? Perhaps a car accident? Sarah didn't blink. No, the injuries are inconsistent with a fall or traffic accident. These are defensive wounds. She pointed to photographs of Isabel's arms, consistent with trying to protect oneself from an attacker, and the facial trauma shows direct, targeted strikes. Webb sat down, looking frustrated. Next came Detective Cooper, who walked the court through the evidence. The traffic camera footage showing Victoria's Mercedes near the quarry at the exact time of the attack. The hospital security footage of Victoria breaking in wearing stolen scrubs. The emails between Victoria and Thomas Brennan discussing removing obstacles. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. Your Honor, ADA Reeves said, the prosecution would like to present audio evidence. This is a recording made inadvertently by the victim, Isabel Sterling, on the day of the attack. It captures the assault as it occurred. Webb objected immediately. Your Honor, this recording was obtained without my client's knowledge or consent. In the commission of a felony, Judge Reynolds cut him off. Objection overruled. We'll hear it. The courtroom fell silent as the recording played. 18 minutes that felt like 18 hours. Victoria's voice, cultured and cold, talking about dirty blood and contaminating their family. The sound of impact, Isabel's screams, Victoria's casual admission of embezzlement, her threats. I watched the jury. 12 faces, diverse in age and background, united in their horror. One woman covered her mouth. A man shook his head slowly. By the time the recording ended, 3 of them were crying. Victoria sat frozen at the defense table, her face ashen. Your Honor, Reeves said into the ringing silence. The state calls Isabel Sterling to testify. My daughter walked to the witness stand with her head high, one hand protectively on her pregnant belly. She'd insisted on testifying despite my concerns, despite Dr. Sarah's warnings. This is my story to tell, Mom, she'd said that morning. I need to say it out loud. I need to face her. Now, under oath, she did exactly that. Reeves guided her through it gently. The discovery of the financial irregularities, confronting Victoria, the drive to the quarry, and then, haltingly, the attack itself. She hit me from behind first, Isabel said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. I didn't see it coming. I fell, and then she kept hitting me with a tire iron from her trunk, and she talked the whole time. What did she say? That I had dirty blood, that I was contaminating her family, that people like me, people with black heritage, didn't belong in their world. Isabel looked directly at Victoria. She said my baby would ruin the Sterling bloodline, that she'd rather see me dead than let me give birth. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Reynolds gavelled for order. When Harrison Webb stood for cross-examination, I tensed, but Isabel was ready. Ms. Sterling, Webb said smoothly, isn't it true that you'd been experiencing marital difficulties with my client's son, that you had financial motivations for accusing his mother? No, Ethan and I were happy. We'd been trying to have a baby for 2 years. This pregnancy was wanted, planned, joyful. But you stand to gain financially from these accusations. I gained a broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, and nightmares I'll probably have for the rest of my life. Isabel cut him off. The only thing I want is justice and safety for my child. That's all I've ever wanted. Webb tried a few more angles, but Isabel didn't waver. When she stepped down, she walked past Victoria's table without looking at her. But I looked, and what I saw in Victoria's face was the beginning of understanding. She was going to lose. The prosecution rested its case late in the afternoon. Webb presented a thin defense, character witnesses who testified to Victoria's charity work, her reputation in the community. But their words rang hollow after what we'd heard. Then, at the end of the day, ADA Reeves stood again. Your Honor, the state would like to call one more witness, Daphne Harrington. I froze. We hadn't discussed this. What was Reeves doing? But she caught my eye and nodded. Trust me. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, was sworn in, and sat down. The courtroom stretched out before me, all those faces, all those eyes, and Victoria, staring at me with barely concealed hatred. Reeves approached gently. Miss Harrington, you're Isabel Sterling's mother, correct? Yes. Can you tell the court about your educational background? My educational? Then I understood. This was the moment. The twist even I hadn't seen coming. I attended the University of Pennsylvania Law School, I said clearly. From 1991 to 1994, I was in the top 10% of my class. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Webb sat up straighter. You didn't complete your degree? Reeves asked. No, my mother was diagnosed with cancer my 3rd year. I took a leave of absence to care for her, and after she died, I chose a different path. I became a nurse instead. But you retained your knowledge of the law? Yes, I've kept up with legal developments over the years. It's always been an interest of mine. Reeves nodded. Ms. Harrington, when your daughter was attacked, when you realized who was responsible, what did you do? I built a case. I looked at the jury. I knew Victoria Sterling had resources, money, connections, expensive lawyers. I knew if I just reported what happened, it might get buried. So I used everything I'd learned in law school. I secured evidence, identified witnesses, found the financial trail. I worked with Detective Cooper and the state attorney's office to ensure that when we brought charges, they would stick. Because? Because my daughter deserved justice, and because I turned to look directly at Victoria. Because I needed Victoria Sterling to understand something. The courtroom was utterly silent. She called my daughter's blood dirty, I said, my voice ringing clear. She said it with such contempt, such certainty, as if she had the right to judge whose blood was worthy and whose wasn't. But I want everyone in this courtroom to understand what that dirty blood really is. I stood up, surprising myself, feeling every eye in the room on me. My grandmother was Zora Harrington. She graduated from Howard University in 1945, when segregation was still legal, when black women weren't supposed to achieve anything. She married my grandfather, a white man, when interracial marriage could get you killed in some parts of this country. She raised a family despite hatred, despite prejudice, despite people like Victoria Sterling who thought her blood made her less than human. My voice grew stronger. That's the blood that flows in my veins, in my daughter's veins, and soon in my grandchild's veins. Blood that survived slavery, survived Jim Crow, survived every attempt to diminish it. Blood that learned to be strong because it had no choice. Blood that learned to fight because no one else would fight for it. I looked at Victoria again. You called it dirty, but Mrs. Sterling, with all your money and your connections and your precious family name, you stole from sick children. You beat a pregnant woman. You tried to commit murder. Twice. So I ask this court, I ask this jury, whose blood is really dirty here? The courtroom exploded. Judge Reynolds was gaveling, calling for order, but I could see it in the jurors' faces, in the spectators' eyes, in the reporters frantically taking notes. We'd won, not just the case, but the narrative, the truth. I sat back down, my heart pounding, and caught Isabel's eye. She was crying, smiling, her hand on her belly. Webb tried to cross-examine me, tried to rattle me with questions about my incomplete legal education and my bias as a mother. But I'd spent 30 years staying calm in emergency rooms, talking down aggressive drunks, comforting dying patients. A pompous lawyer didn't scare me. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, long enough to be thorough, short enough to indicate they'd never really doubted. When they filed back in, Victoria's hands were shaking visibly. Harrison Webb looked grim. Even Judge Reynolds seemed to be holding her breath. Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? A middle-aged black woman in the front row stood. We have, Your Honor. On the count of attempted murder, how do you find? Guilty. Victoria gasped. Webb put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. On the count of aggravated assault? Guilty. On the count of embezzlement? Guilty. 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 On every count. Victoria collapsed into her chair, finally broken, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, but exhaustion, relief, and a bone-deep satisfaction that justice, real justice, still existed. Judge Reynolds set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Victoria Sterling was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Thomas Brennan got 8 years as part of his plea deal. The Hope Foundation was dissolved, its remaining assets distributed to legitimate children's charities under court supervision. Ethan Sterling filed for divorce 3 days after his mother's conviction. He'd sat through the entire trial, growing paler with each revelation. Afterward, he'd approached Isabel and me in the courthouse lobby. "I'm so sorry," he'd said, tears streaming down his face. "I should have protected you. I should have seen what she was. I'm so sorry." Isabel had looked at him for a long moment. "I loved you, Ethan, but you chose her over and over again. Even knowing what she was capable of, you couldn't stand up to her." "I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." He'd pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This is a trust fund for the baby. $500,000, completely separate from the divorce settlement. Your child, our child, deserves security, even if I don't deserve to be part of their life." Isabel had taken the envelope. "Thank you. And Ethan, I hope you get therapy. I really do." He'd nodded and walked away, looking smaller somehow, diminished. William Sterling, surprisingly, had reached out a week later. The elder Sterling patriarch, who'd sat stone-faced through his wife's trial, called and asked to meet. We'd agreed to a neutral location, a diner halfway between our homes. He'd arrived alone, looking older than his 65 years. "Ms. Harrington, Isabel." He'd shaken our hands formally. "I owe you both an apology. I was blind to what Victoria was doing. I let my focus on business, on maintaining our reputation, blind me to the monster I'd married." "Did you know about the embezzlement?" I'd asked directly. "No, but I should have. The signs were there. I chose not to look." He'd paused. "I'm establishing a new foundation in your grandmother's name, Ms. Harrington, the Zora Harrington Foundation for Educational Equity, endowed with $10 million. It will provide scholarships to young people of color pursuing higher education." I'd been speechless. "It's not enough," he'd continued. "Nothing can undo what Victoria did. But perhaps it can honor the legacy you spoke about in court, the legacy of people who persevered despite everything stacked against them." He'd turned to Isabel. "I'd like to be part of my grandchild's life, if you'll permit it. Not as a Sterling imposing on your space, but as a grandfather who wants to do better, to be better." Isabel had considered, one hand on her pregnant belly. Then, "Supervised visits, at our home. And the first time you say anything that sounds like your wife's prejudice, you're out. Forever." "Fair enough." He'd actually smiled. "Thank you." 3 months later, on a warm June morning, I stood in the delivery room holding my daughter's hand as she pushed. "One more, Isabel, one more big push," Dr. Sarah coached. And then, a cry. Loud, furious, alive. "It's a girl," Sarah announced, lifting a squirming, red-faced bundle into view. "A beautiful, healthy girl." They laid her on Isabel's chest, and I watched my daughter, beaten, broken, but undefeated, meet her daughter for the first time. "Hi, baby," Isabel whispered, tears streaming. "Hi, sweet girl. I'm your mama, and I'm going to protect you always. Always." "What's her name?" Sarah asked softly. Isabel looked at me. "Zora. Zora Harrington, after her great-great-grandmother, after a woman who refused to be diminished." I felt my throat close with emotion. "She'd be so proud." "She is proud, Mom. She's watching. I can feel it." 6 months later, I sat on my front porch with Zora asleep in my arms. She was a calm baby, alert and curious, with dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Isabel was in the kitchen making dinner, humming to herself. William Sterling's car pulled up. He'd become a regular visitor, devoted to his granddaughter, clearly trying to atone for his son's weakness and his wife's cruelty. He'd never overstepped, never presumed. Just showed up, brought thoughtful gifts, and sat quietly holding Zora while Isabel and I went about our lives. "Evening, Daphne," he said, climbing the porch steps. "How's our girl?" "Perfect, as always," I smiled. "She's got her great-great-grandmother's determination. Fights sleep like it's a personal enemy." He chuckled and sat in the rocking chair beside me. "May I?" I carefully transferred Zora to his arms. He held her with practiced ease now, gazing down at her with something like wonder. "You know," he said quietly, "Victoria was wrong about so many things, but she was most wrong about this. About blood, about heritage, about what makes a person valuable." He looked at me. "This child, with her mixed heritage, her complicated family history, her grandmother who never gave up, She's going to be extraordinary. Not despite where she comes from, but because of it. I know, I said. We all know. Isabel emerged from the house with 3 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to William, one to me, and kept one for herself. We sat there as the sun set. 3 generations represented on that porch. 4, if you counted Zora. Mom, Isabel said suddenly, tell me again about Great-Grandma Zora. The real stories. Everything. So I did. I told her about the grandmother I'd adored, who'd faced down hatred with dignity, who'd taught me that strength doesn't mean never being afraid. It means acting despite fear. Who'd built a life in a world that didn't want her to succeed, and who'd done it with grace and steel in equal measure. And as I talked, I looked at little Zora sleeping peacefully, and I thought about the legacy we'd built. Not just through DNA, but through choices. Through fighting when we could have run. Through seeking justice when it would have been easier to stay silent. Victoria Sterling had called our blood dirty, had thought it made us less than. But she'd been wrong. So catastrophically wrong. Our blood wasn't dirty. It was gold. Pure, unbreakable, precious gold. And it always had been.